it was already at the end of August. I can't believe the time has flown by. But we met at the end of August. Virginia had included those prior meeting notes. Um, and I want to just revisit them just slightly so that we make sure everyone is on the same page. We have some new folks that are joining us here today who haven't been part of the prior group. So we're really excited to have those additional voices and perspectives here as part of this work group. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Kim Lindberg. My pronouns are she, her. I'm with Child Welfare. I'm one of the child safety program coordinators, and I'm the point person for everything related to mandatory reporting of child abuse here in Oregon. And so it's part of my role to draft curriculum, training, and do community engagement, and to get your feedback about the in-person course that trained facilitators are providing to communities across Oregon. And so this is a big part of our work, is trying to make sure that we have the right information, the most updated information, and so that we can teach the community about what is and is not child abuse, and also connecting families with resources to help them around child abuse prevention. So we are going to take a look at the prior notes. Before we engage in this conversation, right, we're talking about mandatory reporting. We're talking about child abuse. And I just want to recognize that if anyone wants to take space, take a deep breath, if you need to get up and walk away, because we are talking about child abuse, and it can get detailed, and it can create responses in us, and sometimes we need to take breaks, and that is perfectly okay. Our recap of our prior meeting notes. Let's see, we talked, we had a lot of conversation about what is working well in the current in-person mandatory reporting PowerPoint. We talked about some of our hopes and dreams about the information that it could include, and I also gave an overview of the training and education system that child welfare helps support. I highlighted some pieces from our meeting, and a few of the things that we had talked about were key elements based on, I can't remember whose feedback this was, but ideas around supporting this 201 level, this in-person course, would be maybe building in some scenarios, or what happens next, and thinking about local resources. Also, what would the conversation look like within the training if we provided reassurance that a professional reviews your call, maybe more information about the child welfare system, what happens at screening, what happens at protective services, and barriers to families that are system resistant. We also talked about what is and isn't abuse, especially in a cultural context, and how do we maintain rapport with a family while also having to make a report. So some ideas were thrown around about those different things. We also there was an idea that we prompt the audience to seek out training, or to be able to have some support about what, like the beneficial skills that reporters could have around those uncomfortable conversations with families. Folks feel discomfort around that. I mean, there's a lot of different societal reasons for that, right? It's not my business. That's a family situation. I shouldn't get involved. I'm being nosy, right? There's lots of different things that go into that. So how can we help support empathetic and sort of strategic conversations with mandatory reporters so that they can engage families? So that was a good piece that we had discussed. We also talked about maybe doing a recap of the e-learning course at the beginning of the in-person training, just so folks sort of had that continuity of learning. And then for our next steps, we had talked about who's missing from the conversation. We discussed the 9 tribes of Oregon, um, having work groups with law enforcement, educator, medical professionals, and also hearing from a youth perspective about, if mandatory reporters are engaging with them, what that could look like and what they would want their response to be. So those are some of the topics that we talked about last time. We're still very much, from my perspective, in the exploratory phase of what would we like to see? What do we think would be beneficial to communities, mandatory or voluntary reporters, around this training? So I just wanted to kind of do a little bit of a recap of some of the conversations last time. And then part of the homework for this group was to participate in that e-learning course so that everyone had the context for what is involved, what is shared in that 45 to 60-minute e-learning course. What should we then review as part of the in-person course? And what do we make sure we're not duplicating or replicating, knowing that participants' time is valuable and trainers' time is valuable? So wanted to get some ideas from you all about that e-learning course and maybe identifying some of the gaps. So would anyone like to share? Go ahead, Carrie.
So I did it. I asked a couple of colleagues to do it to kind of see how they did where I'm with the CAC. Um, I feel like there's a shift in the focus, and they also expressed that it gave them more ambiguity about, am I supposed to report? Because I think that that's something that I've been working on when I go out into the field, is really having those conversations. If at the end of the day you don't know, you don't have to decide, right? That is up to the screener. And I think it opens up that space of like, well, do I have to really think about it? Are they just people who need resources? And I think it kind of opened up a more doubt for people. And that was kind of across the board of people I spoke to.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Others thoughts about that?
I'll be honest, it's really I mean, obviously I watch it. I watch it every year. I watched it back in March, as my certificate said. I watched it again last night. I think it's hard for honestly, Kim, it's hard for me to do this because I think I know, I mean, I do this work every day. And so it's easy for me, I think, to probably insert things unintentionally. So like I kept trying to remove my child welfare brain who's been doing this for 19 years, right? Is like so I really struggled with this. I think what I know is the in-person, I think it's hard, our in-person trainings provide so much question and answer that I think then gets to the nuances that maybe are missed that I myself unintentionally am inserting as I'm watching it. So that's me being vulnerable and telling you my shortcomings.
No, it's not a shortcoming. I mean, we have to be really intentional about what our lens is and how our experience feeds into that, both professional and personal experiences. Um, I can tell you, Carrie, that was intentional because people should be thinking more carefully and slowly about whether a report is actually required for a family. And we want people to slow down. We want people to be thinking about their biases, to be thinking about their race, the family's race, their culture, the family's culture, and and being cognizant of, well, wait a second, am I making a judgment out of my own experience, out of my own white skin or other skin, that is actually could be causing harm to this family because of a report? And so the shift is intentional.
I can totally see that and totally agree with that. But I think when I sat in yesterday to it was a trauma aware mandatory reporter training. And some of the, people when they articulate what keeps you from making that, what's the worst part about making that report is the fear, right? There's that fear that they're going to make things worse or they're going to do something wrong or not have the right information. And so if they're already doubting it, like, I don't know, I'm not sure, is like, are they going to make that? Will we miss something? Because they were afraid, like maybe I'm just I'm overthinking this and it's me. So I know, I guess that's what I wrestled with when I heard it. Like I can totally see the intention behind that of really having that thought. But I think that's where maybe the in-person comes in of having that conversation. And so if we're not doing that side of it, then it's going to get missed, is my feeling.
Yeah. And we're going to be doing the in-person side of it, right? We're building a curriculum for that in-person engagement. And
Are
so
people
being able
going
to,
to, are they going to take advantage of it though? Or are they going to just say, oh, we did our part, right? We checked the box, it got us our certificate. Is the second half mandatory?
no, it's not, no training is mandatory.
Right,
Right.
right.
It's an option. And for many people, hopefully the e-learning course answers the questions that they have. This is really thinking about for folks who maybe are involved in our systems more regularly, who have these real life experiences because of their profession, what level of support do they need? Because it's the people who request that step 2, the in-person course. It's usually it's mandatory reporters, so it's groups of therapists. I mean, I can pull the data around who is requesting those courses. We can get a better idea of who those individuals are because we track all of that information, which might actually help us with this plan around who are we talking to in this 201 level in-person training. Yeah. So we can look at it that from that lens and then see, right, what questions, like what you were talking about, Carrie and Holly, what questions would remain? Where are those pieces where the doubt comes in? And also balancing that with working towards an anti-racist system in child welfare.
I, and I apologize, I missed the last meeting. So I think from my seat, what continues to be a struggle um, is there are agencies, there are um, mandatory reporter groups that they continue to be told that there are policies in place that they will lose their job if they don't report. So I don't honestly, like, I don't know how we get away. I don't know how we respond to that with any level of training or any level of conversation as long as that exists. And I think just, I mean, that's my daily struggle is I'm working specifically with our local school districts. Um, I mean, I literally have people reporting to Orca saying, I was told by my boss I have to report this. And it's on the same families or it's on poverty, which we try really hard to educate, and yet it's still the same thing. So I guess that's where I sit in this continued I think dilemma of we can educate people as much as we can, but as long as there's these other things that exist that people are like, yeah, that's great, I hear you, but if there's a question I'm going to lose my job, I'm still going to make the same report. You know what I mean? So I guess
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how we get to that because we can't control obviously other HR departments or policies in place. Um,
But that is part of what I do, though. Actually, Holly, that's
Perfect.
part of my role. Is I've been collaborating with Department of Justice because for and the Oregon Bar Association, because all of our school districts, right, they all have their attorneys. Well, if their attorneys are telling them liability-based reporting, that's a problem. And so that's why I'm working with the Oregon Bar Association to make this course the primary course. And so there is that level of community collaboration, because it's got to be, you're right. We have to look at this from multiple levels. And so I look at it from attorneys, statute, policies, all of those types of things, all the way down into our training and education. And so that's sort of what I'm navigating, is trying to figure out all those different pieces where we can insert this shift, right? This shift around when in doubt, report. No, because reporting can actually cause harm if it's truly not a significant or serious concern for a child. It creates harm. And so it's trying to find that balance. So I appreciate you calling that out, and absolutely, and I'm working on it. Yeah, it takes a team. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, because we need those attorneys to, and I don't know that our agency will ever be able to tell attorneys with the Oregon Bar to stop recommending reports that are liability based. Until we have statutory requirements around what training is required, and we don't have that. So that is another level of how do we support this training? How do we support this education from a multi-system perspective? Yeah. And in thinking about this 201 level, right, this in person, kind of going back to what are the identified gaps between the e-learning and maybe not even gaps, but what do we need to expand upon during that in-person training for groups? And so Carrie had talked about how it creates doubt in certain areas. Let's dig into that a little bit more. What is it generally a doubt about whether I should or shouldn't, or is it specific to certain allegations of abuse that people get confused about? Others' thoughts?
Oh, I'm like, could it be like, I feel like a lot of the doubt comes around like maybe physical abuse of, does this qualify? Was this, because we see it more like in our center of like where the line is. But when you're in a school system or a daycare center and you're hearing children report or seeing something suspicious on them, like a bruise, like when do you report?
Thanks, Carrie. Mhm. So what makes something on a child suspicious, which could be based on their mobility, right? Their development, what it looks like, what the child is saying, how they're reacting behaviorally. Mhm.
To hug the mic here, maybe like that thought process of giving people the tools of like, what are the next questions to ask to kind of get the story, because, oh, my mom hit me. And so, your immediate thought is, oh no. But what, like giving them the tools of like, what can be the next questions to ask in order to get a bigger picture.
Mhm.
So that that this is so, well, she was accidentally swatting at a fly, she hit me in the head, and and that's the rest of the story, right? I mean, is anyone else feel
Yeah.
like that? That like that's I think where that's where I hear is like, well, I don't know. Is that ambiguity where people kind of sit there
Mhm.
and they don't want to make it worse.
Yeah.
And I think then you have the opposite where people have no problems asking questions and then jumping in and doing their own forensic interview where they shouldn't be. And then you have whole host of problems. So yeah, I mean, 100% agree. I think that's such a hard balance and a really specific technique of training that we need to do for our mandatory reporters as well.
If I can jump in, just first of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm new. I wasn't able to join the previous group, but had been notified of this incredible effort. And so, my name's Kyle Tarr. I'm with Oregon Child Abuse Solutions. And actually, prior to just joining OCAS earlier this year, I was the prevention director at Liberty House, and I worked with Ruby Sella. And I was there for a little over 3 years. And I actually, in that role, I wasn't aware of DHS's Train the Trainer program and the opportunity that CACs have to be part of this. So, just first of all, just want to express my appreciation for being able to participate in this, and just catching myself up to speed and having some of that experience too, along with Ruby Cell of receiving some range of questions from the general community, also specific groups who are mandatory reporters. Um, I really like the new e-learning course. There is this um, intentional focus on the cultural considerations. I think that was something that we would frequently get asked. Um, and kind of jumping off of Carrie and Holly's comments too, in terms of what might be helpful recapping from the e-learning in this 201 in-person training, I think the types of abuse, just kind of maybe starting off with that, might provide people who have already gone through that step one video, who have questions but didn't have an outlet to be able to ask that. That could be a way to invite people to raise those questions. Another thing I just kind of wanted to suggest that may be helpful, that kind of we had put into practice, with community trainings, is offering like a pre-training, survey, or just open-ended, anonymous sort of form for people to share, whether it's a challenge that they've had in their role if they're a mandatory reporter, or concerns, or specific questions, because some people may be comfortable raising that in the in-person training, but others, if you have that ahead of time too, it also allows that trainer to be able to, adequately prepare, make sure that, they have that, they feel comfortable being able to, address that sort of content and stuff. So that's just kind of something I wanted to suggest to throw in the conversation here.
Thank you. Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, and I'm curious because in the request form for the in-person, it does have an option for them to list out what's prompting this. Why are you requesting the in-person? Do you have any specific questions that you want answered? So it's there, but only the requester is filling that out. So then do you think it would also be beneficial, because then whoever that training is assigned to, right, because each child welfare district and child advocacy center has their own distribution email list, whoever is assigned to that training, do you think that there's also an added benefit of the requester providing participant information in advance and then that survey going out? I'm just trying to think about that, because sometimes we don't even know how many people are coming. They say, oh, maybe 60 people are coming to this training. And so I think about how do we navigate that? Yeah. I was trying to think about that because I love that idea. I'm just trying to think through logistics too.
Yeah, and definitely, welcome Rusel's thoughts. I know I've been a couple months now out of directly facilitating and everything, but I do think that that would be that it was valuable, offering those trainings, because people individually may have questions that they may not even necessarily feel comfortable raising with their supervisor or the person who would be requesting.
Yeah, we could even send it out. I mean, we could develop a survey, and then whoever the requester is, the facilitator, say, hey, in a week, can you send this out to all the folks that you think might be participating? We'd love to get some ideas from them about what the needs are, right? Something like that.
And then that, and in terms of sort of future evaluation, or like updating that sort of feedback could be helpful in what questions are coming up, whether it's ahead of the training, or another feedback or evaluation form after the training too. So, and
Yeah.
I think scenarios too with the in-person, depending on like the different type of group you're talking about, schools or like a childcare type of organization, there might also be an opportunity to address some of that sort of ambiguity or questions that people may have around their specific role that you could tease out a little bit in a scenario, which I think that's helpful to kind of talk through that sort of support versus report conversation. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times, when we were like dealing with first responders, they're entering a situation that the home is potentially hoarder situation, and maybe there's a child in the home. So there were a lot of questions too around like neglect, and that's why I wanted to raise that sort of recap of the types of abuse, and just making sure that if people have questions, there's an opportunity in that this in-person training for them to be able to get that addressed.
Yeah. Okay, so building some scenarios, kind of contingent on who the group is. Okay, being able to do that. And then this group, we could also, part of what we could potentially use this group for is we're looking at the training itself and what we should include or should not include, but we could also re-examine the request form, what information's there. We can also look at the evaluation form, because there is an evaluation form that is sent out that is shared with participants. And if they choose to fill it out and get a certificate of completion, they can. We might move away from that certificate of completion for the step 2, because they already get a certificate of completion with the step 1 for the e-learning course. But it's still really important to be able to have a feedback option. And so we could look at what kind of questions do we want answered within that feedback survey. Because it helps shape future revisions. Yeah. Welcome, Nicole.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. No problem. Let's see. Are there any other perspectives that we want to consider around that e-learning course? Gaps? What else we want to expand upon, depending on the group?
I'm sorry, I just got the link. I just saw this link this morning and I had a meeting this morning, so I didn't get to it. But I'm just wondering, is this also in Spanish or is it just in English?
Right now, the e-learning course, that is the step 1, right now it's only in English. We're making trauma-aware revisions to it and a few other revisions to it. And then that should be ready for translation. So the hope is that the Spanish version will be ready first quarter next year.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the plan. And then the in-person PowerPoint that we're talking about right now, there is a Spanish language version, but we're revamping that. And so we'll revamp the English version, but I would love to be able to think about, okay, we're revamping the English version, but how do we revamp it in a way that it could be translated into multiple languages and be accessible for other groups? So thank you for being here. I really look forward to your perspective.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, and that just kind of prompted a question with the different sort of questions that get raised by different community groups. I'm wondering, Ruby, so if there's anything that like we haven't talked about that from your experience facilitating in both English and Spanish that might be helpful, that would also then inform that sort of this that next step for the Spanish training. not to put you on the spot, but it's just sort of a consideration because I know like you've done a lot of trainings for all different types of groups, and didn't know if there was anything in particular that may just off the top of your head come to mind.
Are you saying like just the Spanish speaking community?
Yeah, if you can recall any like particular differences in maybe like the types of questions, or because I know we've talked about how in particular with like child sexual abuse and some of these are really culturally considered taboo topics, and just if there's anything in particular from your I learned from you so your kind of range of experience with facilitating for different groups.
Yeah, I think mainly what came up with my Spanish speaking, I remember, is talking a lot about what's currently going on with immigration, with um, just that fear of um, mom reporting it because if she reports, they're going to be deported and she's going to be alone. Who's going to support them? So all those things were mainly what came up. So I would like that to be included on there as well, and just have maybe a scenario about that, or something that would help them um, just say, I'm going to report, even though I'm going to be without the support that we've always had, because that's one of the main issues that one of the fears that they have. Or if mom doesn't have, if she's not legal as well, she's feared that, oh, if we're in court and all this goes to the police station, something big is going to happen and my daughter or my son is going to go to a foster parent. So that's what mainly came up with my Spanish speaking.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. Nicole.
I'm a little late, so I don't know what was discussed earlier, and I don't know if Nellie brought this up, but our last training we've done, it's not the first time when we're talking about disproportionality. A lot of times we have been asked questions like wanting to compare the data, like, okay, things are improving now. What does that look like from 5 years ago? They want like numbers. They want something concrete to know, like, how is that different? And the data part, that's always interesting. And if we could provide something like, look at where we are now compared to maybe 8 years ago. These are all the changes that we've done. And we can mention a few, but weren't they wanting some numbers or something, Nellie? Do you remember? They were just curious, so we
Okay. Yeah.
could
So
include
we could go to the child welfare data book and look at that. I don't think the data is going to show us that we're making improvements
Oh,
yet. Right?
okay. So
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well then,
Yeah.
maybe
Disproportionality is,
services, I guess.
I mean, disproportionality is still a huge, huge issue. For Black and or African American, American Indian, Alaska Native families. It's
So no
it's not good.
improvement at all?
What?
No, like zero improvement, not even just a teeny bit?
We can look at that data book, the information. Right, we can pull that. We are limited in data because at screening, so when a report's made to the Oregon Child Abuse Hotline, we ask about a child and family's race and or ethnicity and language, but that is not captured in our overall data because it's reported information. It is not what the family says about how they identify. And so there's a gap in what we know about who is getting reported at the hotline. We do have information if it meets threshold for abuse and it's assigned to Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services, when they're meeting with the family, is gathering that information, and then it's upon that worker, that caseworker, to enter the correct information into our information system. And so that is how we get data. So there's fundamentally a gap because we don't know that we're getting factual information at screening. We don't. We get reported information.
I see, that makes sense, because there's probably a lot of workers, me being one of them, who never made that correction, and I mean, honestly, it
Sure.
was on my list that went somewhere.
Yeah, there are barriers to the information being collected and then being entered into the system. And so our disproportionality here in Oregon, nationally, disproportionality is still a serious issue. And that's where the changes that we're making around training and education and the conversations that we're having, might not see results around how people are changing their mindset for years. Right? Change does not happen overnight. But part of what we are going to develop together is how can we improve that conversation? How can we answer questions so that people who are in the community feel confident about what their role is, know what to report, when to share resources with the family, or how to have that conversation with the family around resources. That's where I see the real strength in this group, is being able to have all of those different perspectives so that we can build something that people can rely on and say, oh yeah, that was really helpful.
So maybe there are some improvements that we're just not able to capture the data.
Right. Not yet. I think about when I'm thinking about data, where can we get different pieces of data? Well, we have who's requesting training. We have feedback surveys about training. But we also know training is not required by statute. And so we're limited by our data. Yeah. So when I'm looking at research and data, I'm looking nationally.
I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any questions about anything we just talked about? We can certainly try to build more data and information. I don't want to mislead people with the data and information. I really want to be really transparent about the ways that we're limited. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump back to agenda. So we talked about the e-learning participation, identifying gaps. Where do folks think we should be heading next in this conversation? What questions haven't been asked yet that we should probably talk about? Are we at a place where we want to start building an outline for this new training? Okay, because I kind of think if we could work together to, here's the information that we've talked about, resources, what would be good for different communities around Oregon to learn, what are the gaps. Then we could start building an outline. And then based on that outline, we could start gathering information from different community groups. And I think about, drafting an initial PowerPoint. And then I can share that at different groups. So I think about the 9 federally recognized tribes here in Oregon, and an educator group or a medical group or law enforcement, and then getting their feedback about what we've drafted. And then if there are any other different community groups, getting feedback before moving forward with these changes. So that's kind of how I see this progressing. So are we ready to start looking at an outline? Yeah. Okay. Would it be helpful let's see. Who here, just raise your hand, who has recently seen the PowerPoint, the in-person PowerPoint that we're talking about revamping? Who has seen that recently?
The one
Nicole?
that we've been using for the last several years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Nellie and I've seen that because we
Okay.
just trained somebody a couple weeks ago.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And Holly says yes, a little while, but yes, okay, great. Let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen because Virginia's here taking notes, so we can kind of shape an outline. I'm not gonna build the outline on my screen because really what I'd like to do is look at the existing and us to say, is this a keep, edit, remove, slide? Because we might not have to recreate everything. We're going to need to create some additional scenarios, conversations, right? But we might not have to recreate everything. So are we okay with starting there? Does that work?
Can I ask just a
Yep.
question that may help inform as we're going through this? Again, apologize because I'm new to this, but with this previous format that we're looking at now, was that like an hour-long training, or do you have like an idea of like what that time frame was? And
Yeah.
one of the reasons I'm asking is if, as we're going through this, if there's any kind of consideration into like facilitator flexibility, because I know different groups may have different sort of time that they have for like an in-person training. So that's why I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. So this training, usually what we tell participants, it's usually 60 to 90 minutes. But I know Nicole gives a lot of these trainings. So Nicole or Nellie, do you have a better estimation?
Probably the longest is 90 minutes. What you say, Nellie? Depending if people have questions, it may not take that long.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
do you agree, Nellie? I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. But this training also includes watching that video. That's 27 minutes. So we're cutting that out at the get-go, right? So when I think about potentially what is a reasonable time frame to provide this training, I'm thinking under an hour, right? I think about lunch breaks, team meetings, management meetings. I think about the different places that this information would be shared. And I think keeping it under an hour is probably reasonable. Yeah.
Like, 45-minute presentation, 15-minute conversation.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And that conversation could be woven through, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's kind of our goal, keeping it under an hour for the whole thing. All right. This is really an intro. I don't know. Okay. Keep. I mean, this is an intro. I would say we kind of need to keep this. We might need to modify it a bit. Yeah. Okay. Training outcomes. This is going to have to be modified because this is going to be based on our outline, right? So I'll do a review and comment. It's not even outline. Okay. Trauma aware. I want to give folks a moment to read through this.
I like this one. I
Okay.
said we take out the video part,
Right.
but
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just typing that same thing. I've always appreciated that slide.
Okay.
Yeah, just want to echo. I think that's just kind of best practice, starting off with that acknowledgement and just giving that
Mhm.
context before you dive in deeper.
Okay. And then we'll delete the video. Fundamentals. We had included this fundamentals slide because, right, folks are coming off the video. And I was asked once, okay, people may have zoned out during the video. Sure, they're only human. What are the things you want them? The only things that they're going to walk away knowing, this is it. These are those fundamentals. These are those reinforcement points. Oh, Nellie.
I just this slide for me, I feel like where everybody kind of gets stuck on is where we say report 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when you're not working. It's
Mhm.
almost like we lose people right there and they're like, wait a minute, what does that mean? And they can't seem past that. And there's always some sort of conversation afterwards, about, well, this is what, it means if you're out in the community and you see a child walking, alone on the street. Which I think as we go on in the training, there's a slide about that.
Okay.
But that particular sentence right there always creates some questions.
Confusion. Should we just take it out? Or
I
is it
kind
helpful
of
to point out that mandatory means all the time, whether you're working, personal,
think
professional?
so. I think it has a lot of questions, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because I could see some people waiting until the following Monday to make their report because that's when they work next.
Yeah.
So Nellie's right, they do get stuck, but at the same time, I think that's so, in my opinion, it's okay because we can then explain.
What if we keep those together? Report immediately, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Mm.
That makes more sense, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And we had talked before about, well, Holly had brought up, well, if I have a school district that says they're told to call in, this is where we try to get at that. You don't defer your obligation to someone else, despite internal policies directing you otherwise. That means that the teacher who told the school counselor, who told the principal, who told the administrator, it's not the administrator who should be calling. It is the teacher who should be calling to make that report.
Sometimes they tell them not to make a report.
Uh-huh.
That happens.
I have to say that we do have that conversation in our training. It is the responsibility of the mandatory reporter, and we talk about policies, and that is a question. If that is a policy, then it's a broader topic to talk about. Some will have the policy that they need to report with their supervisor, but that may not be immediately. That may, we might have to wait till they're up, and then that negates the immediate side of that. So.
Yeah. More to come on this, little sidebar, but I was just reviewing a research article about how mandatory reporting was improved when people could staff with their supervisor first. Interesting. I'm not through the research yet, but more to come.
I like
Well-
that as long as their supervisor
Mhm.
is adequately trained
Right,
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
Because there is a school district that in my area that requires that they staff with the administrator before calling things into Orca.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, frankly, that's on a nosy basis. I don't, because then there's also tracking that they do internally and there's a form they have to fill out. So it's not necessarily to determine the appropriateness of what they're looking at and what, so anyway.
Yeah, you got to wonder why they're doing it that way. There's maybe other motives.
Kim,
Thanks,
can I
Carrie.
ask you something? I don't know if this is appropriate or the appropriate place to put it, but we have been asked about what are the consequences of not reporting. And I don't know, I think it talks about it one of the other slides later, but would this be an area to include it? Or is that seems kind of harsh?
I think, well, it is included in the e-learning.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure. Because there is a $2,000 fine if you're found to be negligent in your reporting responsibilities if you're a mandatory reporter. But I think even though that is true, we weren't strongly emphasizing that. Really, it's the other pieces around what is or is not child abuse that we were trying to emphasize, because if we really focus in on the punitive nature of it, that then supports over reporting and reporting based on liability instead of actually child safety.
that makes sense.
Okay, so we made a few edits to this one. Are we thinking generally keep? Are there more edits that we want to make? Because we don't have to decide on the edits right now. We can just say, you can just say, I think this one needs a little bit of work, and I'll make a note, and then we can revisit it. Thoughts, Ruby? I saw an eyebrow go up.
I think it looks good.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. All right, okay. This is not your only opportunity to review this either, folks, right? All right, and then we have when a child reports abuse, you should, and then we're giving some guidance. The thing to keep in mind is a person might not have contact with the child. They might have heard it from somebody else. They might have heard it from another child or another adult or from someone else entirely, a third party. So I don't know. I still think this part of the conversation is really valuable so that people who are engaging with children and families know how to have these conversations. And that was something that some of you had talked about earlier today. But we also know that sometimes reporters don't have contact with kids. I'll give you a chance to review this.
Could we maybe say that up front? Like, we totally recognize that your profession might not require you to interview kids. However, if you are interviewing children, these are some of the steps to follow that could be really beneficial to getting a good, having a good interview. Sorry, not interview, getting like a good, you know what I mean?
Okay. And I'm just kind of taking notes here. Keep, edit, remove.
Keep.
Keep.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a keep. I think it's like we talked about, it's important for people to, regardless of kind of how they may, have contact with children, to be equipped to properly kind of receive that disclosure and,
Mhm.
know how to follow those next steps. I didn't
Mhm.
know if this was kind of like the appropriate place to raise this question, but kind of going off of that previous slide of the let's talk fundamentals, is there anything before then we're moving into this next slide of number 5 of recapping or pulling out from the e-learning course
Yeah,
before
yeah,
we
yeah.
go in? Because that's when I was reviewing the e-learning course and we were talking about data. I really liked even like the pie chart that the learning course has of the different from the welfare data book, the
Mhm.
different types of abuse. Um, and before we're kind of then diving in deeper, that
Mhm.
sort of recap could be a space for any sort of immediate questions related to those types of abuse.
Okay.
I didn't know if this was the proper time
Yeah.
to raise that, but just wanted to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, I put that as a comment over here to consider around this Let's Talk fundamentals, either before or after we can figure out placement. But yeah, doing the recap there would be great. Okay, and then we have remaining calm, considering your role. Nellie, kind of to what you were saying around that your profession may not include contact with children, but that's a key point here is because this person could have contact with a child at their local park or where they're walking their dog. And so it's not just your profession, it's anywhere in your life where children are around. And so maybe focusing on that, right? Okay. Okay. The next, so we have 2 slides about what you should do. Listening intently, and this is where we give guidance around not conducting a forensic interview or, with this child, but asking open-ended questions.
And I guess a question that I would just want to raise, maybe specific to that last bullet point,
Okay.
is kind of what typically comes up in like community trainings, not even just specifically mandatory reporters around like disclosure and that is avoiding making any promises. So I didn't know if there's any sort of consideration to that sort of language in terms of do what you can to make certain the child is safe from further abuse, because that reporter may not be in that position to, they can do what they fulfill their obligations as a mandatory reporter, but they may not have that, ability to ensure that safety of the child, if that makes sense.
On the next slide, do not make promises.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, you bet. You bet. Any other feedback about this one? Thank you, Kyle. That is really important. Their suggestion.
I like this slide
I
too.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I like it. I don't know if you had something that I.
No, I was gonna say I like it too, and I also like how we start with um kind of giving an example of what an open-ended question is. Sometimes seeing people don't even know what that means. They just think they're asking questions, so that's helpful.
I agree.
Okay. Could we give another example of an open-ended question? Or you know any more about that? Any other updates or changes that folks think are necessary for this slide? Okay, I'm going to move on. Now we're going to move into the do nots. All right, so this is a little bit longer. I'll give you a chance to review it. There's a section of this slide that I struggle with. I'll let you read. No, you don't. Just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to talk. Okay, I'll tell you where I struggle with this slide. At the bottom, we say, do not notify the alleged offender. It could compromise a Child Protective Services assessment or law enforcement investigation. So am I reaching out to a family to see how I can help them and give them resources and supports, or am I not communicating with the family? It's a mixed message. And I've struggled, with this for a while. How can we provide clarity around that point? I mean, here we are talking about engaging families. What kind of resources, what kind of supports do they need? Are there risk factors because of poverty, right? Poverty is not abuse. It creates risk factors for families. What other risk factors are there that you could identify and have a conversation with the family around? Or is it because that the abuse has happened or the risk is so high that you just need to make a report and not tell them? Right? So it gets complicated, especially then in later slides, we talk about how to maintain relationship. Well, and we say, hey, come alongside that family, make the report together, let them know that you have to fulfill your obligation as a mandatory reporter and still offer to be a support for them. Thank you, Rusella. So I struggle with this one.
Can we say something like, do not question the alleged offender about the allegation? Can we put something like, you can provide support to the family, but don't question them, or is that kind of?
Maybe it still seems a little wishy-washy. I mean, I love your sharing ideas. I don't know that that's going to give people quite the clarity yet.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, Holly, you work in a child welfare office. I mean, is this something we really have to be aware of? Is a mandatory reporter alerting an alleged perpetrator? I mean, is that actually a real problem that hurts kids and compromises investigations? Or is that an old type of thinking?
Probably an old type of thinking, honestly. I never really thought about it like that.
Well, I was about to give the infamous child welfare answer. It depends,
Well, yes.
Yeah.
right? It depends. And
Tell
then law
me-
enforcement gets involved.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean you've already reached out? How did so
Yeah.
it's complicated.
Mhm.
And this is one of those really nuanced pieces around, again, and I think immediately to schools, because those are the ones that frankly I have the most challenges with around over reporting. I'm just gonna say it. And trying to educate. But I mean, really, like, this is one of those things that, I mean, I've literally had a school counselor
Hmm.
get a little notion of a concern from a child, completely dove in, and then didn't call the hotline timely because they didn't think child welfare would do anything about it. And then they called the alleged perpetrator, one of the parents, to basically try to circularly get to the concern. I mean, it was a disaster. And then detectives are saying, well, now we can't do anything, right? Like,
Hmm.
the school counselor literally has messed up any attempt at a true investigation that we could have done something about. So I think this is really, really sticky.
Mhm.
And again, not that anybody was ill intentioned or doesn't care about kids, but really, like, this is one of those pieces that we have to figure out how to adequately and appropriately educate our mandatory reporters about what is their role, and it cannot be the role of their professional working capacity. What is their role as a mandatory reporter? Because those are two very different things in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Sorry, I get on a soapbox on certain things, and it's usually around our educators, unfortunately, because I love and adore them, and sometimes they can be the most challenging around this topic. So, and again, not ill-intentioned at all, but
Yeah.
No, but yes, I understand. And it's not just here in Oregon. It's not just in Salem. Nationally, we know that who educators are. They're mostly white middle class women who are
Mm.
educators. And then that feeds all of this other bias and stereotype and yeah, so much else can contribute to that, that educators can create some problematic dynamics within the child welfare system. Yeah. Mhm. Yep. Thanks, Nicole, for being here. Okay, and I know we're winding up, but when I think, Holly, sort of what you have talked about around this piece is, if we think a crime has been committed, I feel like that is one of the it depends factors. And so while we don't need Joe Schmo to say, oh, I know statute and I know what is or isn't a crime, we don't expect a layperson to have that knowledge, but I'm pretty sure most people realize that sexual abuse is a crime. Right? Nellie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I love that you kind of hone in on this because it's a really great point. But I also kind of think about, what about if we called a parent and then it would compromise the interview, right? Maybe the parent says to the child, oh, someone's going to interview you, do not say anything. And that gets really complicated too. Because then you're kind of like, okay, this maybe I'm not going to get the worker maybe it's not going to get the right information, correct information, because they've been influenced by their parent.
Yes, that certainly happens. How often does it happen? Right? How are we balancing the positive nature of that collaborative relationship and supportive relationship that reporter has potentially with that child and family? And then how does that balance? But in some situations, truly, a report needs to be made. This is a potential crime. And your role is done. You make the report, your role needs to be done. And we are asking mandatory reporters to do complicated things. And it does depend on so many different factors. Holly, can you think of anything other around the it depends? Because I completely get it. It depends on the unique characteristics and situation. Do you think it's more helpful to call out, do not notify the person if you believe it could be a crime? And I think specifically around physical abuse, sexual abuse.
I get nervous because I mean, what we initially might get from a kid and what we end up gathering from a child, I mean, can like someone may see, I don't know, I guess I'm struggling with this one, Kim.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I understand the intention of what's written. Like I understand your struggle with the intention of what's written, right? Like how you articulated that the beginning of this conversation. Um I feel like there's got to be a better way to actually just completely maybe change I mean, take out, I think, everything as written and maybe and just completely reframe it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. With
Mm-hmm.
like maybe a specific example that we provide, or I mean, just craft some language that really gets to what we want to address here, but not necessarily maybe the way it's currently written.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
an example would be really helpful, because if we say, don't call the alleged offender if you believe a crime has occurred, I think you're going to get, well, I thought all child abuse was a crime. And then you go
true.
down those, it just, you start to lose people and go a different direction.
Yeah, so like I'm thinking of like how you talked about poverty. I mean, I think if you could even just if we could just even provide that type of example of
Mhm.
if you believe that you can provide a resource to the family that might address the concerns brought to you, something like that. I mean, I don't know, and I realize that's a very narrow scope, but you know what I mean? I don't know that a blanket do not notify or anyway, just I guess I'm struggling to try and come up with something right now, but just a thought.
Okay. I think we just have 2 minutes. This just to kind of let's see. Do we have another meeting scheduled, Virginia? No.
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. So Virginia and I will be working together. You're going to be receiving a doodle poll, right? We're down to just a few folks here, but a lot of people were invited to this meeting. So we're going to do another doodle poll and have our next meeting. In the meantime, here, I'll stop sharing my screen. In the meantime, what do you think we should be working on? Do you want me to start working on an outline? Does that feel premature? Should we continue the evaluation of the PowerPoint and say yes, no, and then that feeds into our outline? Is it helpful to go through the PowerPoint?
I thought it was helpful.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's helpful too, because it feels to me, being new to this, that helps inform then kind of fleshing out further the outline of it by taking a look at what's, keep, review, edit.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So we'll have this recording. Virginia and I will craft a communication to the other team members that weren't able to be here today. Make sure they have access to the recording, and then we'll work on another meeting time to continue the conversation. So, okay. Well, thank you all so much. Any wrap-up questions? Okay. All right. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye.
Great day.